My name is Claire Bennett. I was 38 years old when my husband tried to end our 12-year marriage with a text message. I was standing behind the register at my boutique in Austin, Texas, helping one of my regulars, Mrs. Franklin, pick out a silk wrap when the notification buzzed on my phone. "I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account." No apology, no explanation, just that. My hands didn't shake. My voice stayed steady as I complimented Mrs. Franklin's choice and wrapped her purchase in tissue paper. The only outward sign that my life had just been detonated by a man I once loved was a brief tightening around my eyes. When the door closed behind her, I typed my response, just 2 words. "Good luck." You see, while Mark might have thought his grand exit would devastate me, I had been preparing for months. This wasn't a surprise. It was just confirmation. The signs had been everywhere. He stopped coming home on time, kept his phone face down, and suddenly developed a passion for the gym after a decade of couch sitting. I found a dinner receipt for 2 at a fancy steakhouse on a night he claimed to be working late. That same evening, I opened a new bank account in my name only. A week later, he suggested we merge our finances to simplify things. I smiled and agreed, moving my savings to the new account while leaving just enough in the joint one to keep him from noticing. I didn't know the exact day he'd make his move, but I knew it would come. And now it had. While Mark was packing his bags and likely congratulating himself on his boldness, I was calmly locking up my boutique for the day, not because I was broken but because I had a plan. I've always believed that instincts are just experience whispering, and for months, mine had been whispering louder than ever. The first time I noticed something was off, it wasn't anything dramatic, just a shift. A pause in his tone when I asked about work. A new passcode on his phone after years of not needing one. Excuses that sounded rehearsed. And then came the credit card statements, hotel charges in cities he wasn't supposed to be in. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I documented. I started keeping a digital folder. Screenshots of texts, scanned receipts, bank transfers, late-night charges to restaurants and online flower services. It wasn't about revenge back then, it was about protection. I'd worked too hard to build something from nothing to let it be dismantled by someone else's secrets. Mark never took my boutique seriously. He called it my little shop, like it was a cute hobby I'd tire of. What he didn't know was that my little shop pulled in more revenue each quarter than his mid-level management salary ever did. It paid for our vacations, our health insurance, and part of his student loans. But I never mixed our finances when it came to the business. From day one, I kept it separate, legally and financially. Boutique Bennett was incorporated under my name, with its own tax ID, separate books, and a quiet accountant I trusted like family. Every penny was tracked, every expense recorded. When I saw that first suspicious charge 6 months ago, I quietly met with a divorce attorney named Grace Whitmore. She was sharp, calm, and direct. She didn't feed me false hope. She handed me a plan. "Start gathering everything," she told me, "and don't let on that anything's wrong." That night, I went home and acted like everything was normal. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I even laughed at one of his tired jokes, not because I was in denial, but because I was preparing. Every time he stayed out late, I saved the timestamp of his text. Every time I noticed a new shirt in his closet, I took a photo. When he started suggesting I add his name to the deed of the house my grandmother left me, I made an appointment to confirm with the county clerk that it was solely mine. I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. People like Mark always assume you'll fall apart without them. That you'll beg, cry, or collapse. What they never see coming is the woman who saw it coming. So when the text finally came, it didn't knock me over. It confirmed what I already knew. And I was ready. While he chased fantasy, I held on to reality, and that made all the difference. That evening, while Mark was likely enjoying his final hours of imagined freedom, I was sipping a glass of Cabernet in the home he'd once tried to claim. It wasn't our home. It was mine, left to me by my grandmother, and kept in my name despite Mark's repeated attempts to simplify things by adding his, another instinct that had quietly paid off. I sat at the dining room table, sorting through the documents my attorney would need: deeds, bank statements, incorporation records, each one a quiet fortress built over years of diligence. While I worked, I found our wedding album tucked in the back of a drawer. I flipped through it without emotion. Mark looked so different then before the crisis of aging had turned him into a man chasing youth like it was a prize he deserved, just for showing up. He wore tight shirts now to hide the softening of his midsection. He used slang that didn't suit him and laughed too loudly in rooms full of people who were too polite to tell him how awkward to. My phone buzzed again. "Don't bother begging. Haley and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Haley, the receptionist at his office. I'd met her once at their Christmas party. Young, overeager. She laughed too loudly at Mark's bad jokes and touched his arm like it was hers to claim. I watched her that night and knew, not from jealousy but from experience. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the text to my lawyer. She'd already drafted the divorce papers weeks ago. Now, it was just about timing. I told her to wait, let him get to Miami first. Let him think he'd won. A few minutes later, another message buzzed in. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger, after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My little shop. The business I built from nothing. The one that employed 3 people, ran a profitable e-commerce line, and had a waiting list for private styling appointments. The same boutique that covered our mortgage for the last 2 years when Mark's bonuses dried up. I smiled, poured another glass of wine, and pulled out the business card of the credit card company. "Mrs. Bennett speaking," I said calmly. "I'd like to report some fraudulent charges, and I'll need to remove an authorized user." Tomorrow, Mark and Haley would arrive at the airport and find their tickets voided, their hotel reservation gone. But tonight, I would enjoy the quiet. The power of knowing I had acted with patience, with clarity, and without ever having to raise my voice. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, as if the sky itself had decided to be on my side. I dressed simply: black slacks, navy blouse, low heels. I didn't need dramatics. I had documentation. As I entered the courthouse with Grace, my lawyer, I spotted Mark standing near the benches, trying to look confident in a designer blazer 2 sizes too small. His girlfriend Haley waited outside, shifting uncomfortably in a skirt that didn't quite match the seriousness of the day. When the judge called our case, I noticed Mark's lawyer looked as though he'd just skimmed the file that morning. I, on the other hand, had been preparing for this for months. Grace began methodically, laying out our case with calm clarity. She presented screenshots of Mark's texts. The one where he boasted about draining our joint account. His mockery of my age. His admission of using the shared credit card to fund his romantic getaway. Then came the receipts, the canceled tickets, the business documentation, the house deed in my name, the incorporation papers for Boutique Bennett, showing I was the sole owner before and during the marriage. It was all there, organized, dated, and undeniable. Mark's lawyer stood, clearly rattled. "Your Honor, my client admits to some impulsive decisions, but Mrs. Bennett's actions have been, frankly, vindictive and calculating." Grace didn't flinch. "Calculating? No, Your Honor. Prudent. My client protected her separate property and maintained financial boundaries, something her husband clearly did not. That's not vindictive. That's just smart." The judge nodded and reviewed the files again. "Mr. Bennett," he said, looking over his glasses, "you admit to deliberately draining a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this?" Mark shifted in his chair. "I was just trying to make a clean break." "By committing financial fraud?" the judge interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "And now you claim rights to assets that this documentation clearly shows are separate from marital property." Mark's lawyer tried once more. "The business expanded during the marriage. My client believes he is entitled to a portion." Grace stood again. "Your Honor, the business was established before the marriage. Mrs. Bennett maintained entirely separate records, investments, and accounts. We have documentation of every penny. Mr. Bennett never contributed, nor did he claim to until now." Mark was sweating by this point. Reality was finally sinking in. The plan he thought would make him rich and free had instead made him accountable. The judge leaned forward. "The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct. All shared assets will be frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Bennett is ordered to return all funds withdrawn from joint accounts within 24 hours." Mark looked stunned. "But the money's gone. We spent it." "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it," the judge said flatly. "And Mr. Bennett, This court does not look kindly on using marital resources to support extramarital relationships. I didn't look at Mark as we left the courtroom. I didn't need to. His mother was waiting by the doors, her arms crossed. She gave me a nod tight, embarrassed, then turned to scold her son. "What were you thinking?" I heard her say. "A 20-year-old? Credit card charges? That text message?" I didn't stop to listen. My heels clicked down the marble hallway, steady and confident, each step carrying me further away from the man who thought he could dismantle me with a text message, and closer to the life he never believed I was strong enough to build. In the weeks after the hearing, it became clear just how fragile Mark's new life really was. He and Haley had moved into a budget motel near the airport, after their plans to stay at a luxury hotel fell apart, thanks to my timely fraud report. His personal credit cards were maxed out, and his request for an advance from his employer had been denied. Meanwhile, Boutique Bennett was thriving. I hired 2 new employees to keep up with growing demand. A feature in a local lifestyle magazine had brought in new customers, many of whom had heard rumors about my situation and showed up to support me. Some just wanted to shop. Others came in quietly, touched my arm, and said things like, "I went through something like this too. You're an inspiration." The business wasn't just a store anymore, it was becoming a movement. Through mutual friends, I heard Mark had tried returning his expensive clothes to get cash back most places refused. He complained about how unfair the judge was, how I had set him up, how he was just trying to start over. His version of the story always made him the victim. One afternoon, his sister Amanda walked into my boutique. She picked up a scarf and ran her fingers along the edge for a long time before finally speaking. "We didn't support you at first," she admitted. "He made it sound like you were cold, controlling. He said you belittled him. But then we saw the texts, the way he bragged about taking the money, the way he mocked your age. I'm ashamed we believed him." I didn't say much, just thanked her for coming. That evening, Grace, my lawyer, called with another update. Mark's filed a petition to challenge the settlement. He's claiming the text about draining the account was a joke. I actually laughed. "A joke?" That's what he said. The judge asked if haha makes theft legal. The petition was denied, of course. He tried again, this time claiming that my boutique was only successful because of his emotional support. Grace responded by submitting text messages where he mocked my business, calling it a hobby and something to keep me busy. The judge's response was short: emotional sabotage is not support. As the weeks turned into months, Haley left him. She posted vague quotes about lessons learned and toxic partners before quietly changing her relationship status and disappearing from his digital orbit. Mark moved back in with his parents. Word spread quickly. Even people who had once doubted me were now avoiding him. I never had to raise my voice. I never had to make a scene. All I did was keep good records, trust my instincts, and stay ready. While he scrambled to regain control, I was already opening my second boutique. 1 year after that first text, Boutique Bennett opened its 3rd location in San Antonio. The grand opening was everything I had dreamed of: local press, a ribbon cutting, and a line of customers that wrapped around the corner. People didn't come to hear about betrayal anymore. They came to hear about business, about resilience, about how a woman rebuilt not just her life but a legacy. I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference later that fall. The topic wasn't divorce or heartbreak, it was building a bulletproof business. During the Q&A, a woman raised her hand and asked, "My husband says I'm being paranoid for keeping separate accounts for my business. He says marriage means sharing everything. Am I wrong?" I smiled gently. "My ex-husband said the same thing," I said, "right before he tried to take half of what I built. Protection isn't paranoia, it's wisdom." The room erupted in applause, not because the story was dramatic, but because it was real. Relatable. Too many women had heard the same lies, the same gaslighting wrapped in the language of love. Mark, meanwhile, filed another petition. This time he claimed that his moral encouragement helped me build the boutique. Grace didn't even blink. She simply resubmitted the social media posts where he called it my cute little project and the texts where he told me to get a real job. The judge dismissed it in under 10 minutes and ordered him to pay court costs. The last time I saw Haley, she walked into my original boutique quietly and bought a candle. She didn't say much until she was at the counter. Then she paused and said, "I believed everything he told me, that you were cold, controlling, selfish. But when he tried to move in with me and told me to take out a loan to help him rebuild, I realized I'd just become his next plan. I nodded. They always have a plan, until the women stop playing along. Melissa, my new assistant manager, coincidentally also named Melissa, watched her leave and asked softly, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I said. "That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." Every time I passed the framed screenshot of Mark's message, "Have fun with your little shop," I smiled. It had become my favorite piece of decor, not because it hurt, but because it reminded me just how far I'd come. And how wrong he'd been. 5 years after the text that was supposed to break me, I stood in the flagship store of Boutique Bennett, surrounded by employees, loyal customers, and community leaders. We were celebrating our 5th anniversary, and I had just finished giving a short speech about growth, gratitude, and grit. I was thanking my team when I noticed Mark's mother standing quietly near the back, holding a handbag I recognized from our fall collection. When the crowd thinned, she approached me. "I saw Mark last week," she said, smoothing the hem of her dress. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. But he still doesn't get it. He didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." She glanced around the store, now 3 times its original size, with framed magazine covers on the wall, and an entire team of women I'd mentored. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she added. "You taught our family the difference between enabling someone and supporting them. We don't defend him anymore." I nodded, unsure what to say. It wasn't about her anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Behind the register, Melissa, the younger one, called me over with a question about our new inventory system. As I walked toward her, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the storefront window. I didn't see a woman past her prime like Mark had once tried to suggest. I saw someone wiser, sharper, stronger. His cruel message had meant to end me. Instead, it had launched a life far greater than the one I'd shared with him. And every woman who heard my story would know, when someone tries to dim your light, you don't shrink. You shine brighter. What he thought would destroy me became the moment I rebuilt everything. Not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of clarity, of knowing my worth, of trusting my instincts. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to start over, protect what's yours, or rise from the wreckage of someone else's betrayal, know this: you are not alone. Leave a comment if you've lived through something similar. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, success doesn't always roar. Sometimes it quietly outlasts every person who once doubted you.